Mm.
Good morning, and thank you. Welcome to this session on Nothing About Us Without Us: Local Leadership and Climate Mobility Decisions. I want to start with a huge thanks to ASU and to the Global Futures Lab, to the audience, and to my fellow panelists. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about the intersection of climate displacement, climate change, and centering the voices of affected communities and refugees in those policy decisions. My name is Hardin, and I'm the Vice President of Refugees International. We are an NGO based in Washington, D.C., that focuses on the rights and protection of people in forced displacement, IDPs, refugees, and asylum seekers around the world. The intersection of these two issues is something that's very deep and at the heart of our work at Refugees International. We've had a climate displacement program for over a decade, and it's something that we saw coming sort of down the pike quite some time ago. And I would say that over the last 5 to 6 years, it's become a real core strategic element of our work. When I started working for this organization, like 4 or 5, 6 years ago, I would have maybe two reports that would come across my desk that would focus on climate displacement. At this stage, it's probably half the reports that I see coming through that deal with this. So it's a lot of work that's coming through. Um, the other thing that's really at the heart of this entire process is trying to center the voices of affected communities in the decision-making process. We at Refugees International now have a program focusing on refugee fellows that really try to bring the voices of affected communities into the policy process because at the end of the day, policies can't be responsive to the needs of communities if they're not at the heart and centered in that decision making process. So, finding ways to bring together these agendas around global climate displacement, international sort of negotiations that we're here at COP around, coupled with the importance of centering the voices of affected communities in those discussions, is really something that we're going to delve in today and get to the heart of. And so, I want to turn and sort of welcome my fellow panelists. I'm going to be joined by Marcela Toneo Oliva, who is here representing UNICEF Guatemala and is also part of the Guatemala's national delegation. She works very closely with youth and affected communities and climate change in Guatemala. And then next we have Shaza Al Rahawi, who is a fantastic person. She's a co-founder of the Global-Led Refugee Network, which is an organization that Refugees International tries to support, works closely with, do amazing work around the world in terms of getting refugee voices directly into the policy process. She's also with the Climate Coalition for Migrants and Refugees in Europe. And so welcome and thank you very much for joining us today. And then finally, Shakarul Islam, who is the chairperson of OKU, which is a community-based organization in Bangladesh, which works at the intersection of migrant workers and climate displacement. And so we're really grateful that you were able to join us today and really looking forward to the opportunity to getting into this question of migrant workers and climate change in the context of Bangladesh. So before I go into any deeper discussion, Marcella, why don't we turn it over to you and you can tell us a little bit about your experience with youth voices and the youth community in Guatemala and climate change. I mean, something that we're seeing in our research at Refugees International is this real increase in the severity of sort of sudden onset climate extreme weather, particularly like hurricanes. You're saying, and the impact that that has had on local communities and the inability to sort of recover in the amount of time that's available and the impact on displacement is something that we in our research have seen a great deal of. So we'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it's really good to be here. I want to tell you, I work for UNICEF Guatemala, and we have been working with youth and vulnerable communities, looking for the climate change impact for them. How do we do that? Actually, we are with this new platform called Agentes Eco or Agents ECO, where we are trying to understand how youth can work with climate change things. I mean, for example, youth is very vulnerable because of all the impacts of climate change. For example, these diseases, they are really they can really get sick with this. And also, their bodies are not ready for the extreme climate change that they can see. So, yes, we are working with that, creating this new platform and trying to make the children. new advocates because we want them to raise their voices because they are being vulnerable and they need to do something with the government as well because they want to be heard. So that's what I do. That's why I am a young advocate, my youth advocate, and I'm trying to represent my country like that. I'm doing that because climate change is something that is really important and we need to do something about it. So, yes, I think in Guatemala, it's really awful the situation with the hurricanes and all these natural disasters. I think that we as youth we need to go with all these leaders, national leaders, because sometimes Guatemala doesn't have the capacity to take care of these disasters.
Mm.
So yes, and children they are the most affected with all of this. It's a like a silent thing. So yes, that's what I said, talking about youth in climate change of my country. Also with the communities, I mean, it's something real that the vulnerable communities or the native communities are the most affected with all of this, and they are not visibilized. That's why we want to raise our voices for them as well, because it's something real. So I think it's important to do that in Guatemala.
Could you say a word about where the biggest touch points or the greatest opportunities for youth to get their voice into the national conversation in Guatemala?
I think, for example, I think that UNICEF Guatemala in this case is a really good opportunity because they are letting us to raise our voices. With this new platform, I think it's the most important thing because they are allowing us to go with the government and tell to them we are here. So please listen to us. So I think that's what can we do. I mean, go and ask, work because we can do it. I mean, we just need to know how. So yes, that's what I think. Just allowing us to raise our voices.
Thank you. Shaz, if I could turn to you now. So GRN, and in fact, many of the organizations that you work with are really fundamentally about trying to get the voices of refugees and the forcibly displaced into the center of the policy conversation. What do the dynamics look like when it comes to climate and climate mobility?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me today. As a co-founder of the GRN, we thought that the voices of the affected community, so I'm including everyone, like not only the refugees,
Yeah.
which is we are fighting for, but also all people under the displacement, if we can say. We came to build their voices in the policy debates, whatever the policy about. So if you look at refugee in the climate change, you will see where is the link, right? So what we are seeing nowadays is people might be affected locally by the climate issues, but they will move and they will be displaced people within their community. But what we saw recently that people were forced to move times and times just because of the climate change. So in the camps, like if we go to the India, if we go to the Asia, where in Bangladesh, Cook's Bazaar, we see that people are already refugees there, but now they have to move because of floods, because of droughts, because of so many things. So it's actually a circle where people have to move and move and move forcibly without having any resources, any way to say no, and the all policies are just stuck to the debate, the political debates, and so on and so forth. But what about the needs of those people? And we see that sometimes these debates, these policies, is not really linked to the needs, actual needs of the community, the affected community. And this why, as a refugee leaders, we are trying to bring their voices to this kind of platforms because it's not about just doing consultation and going back and that's it. Everyone can do some consultation, and to be honest, just to let you know, I hope I'm not shocking you. We as a refugee sometimes we feel like we just ask, so we have to be polite. Because we privileged to be asked by UNHCR or by whenever, I don't know, the stakeholders. So actually, if they said everything's okay, it's okay. Yeah. Do you have a food? It's okay. Yes, it is okay. This is what we feel because we don't feel the ownership. We feel like we are privileged. It's not our right to say no. What you give me is not enough. No, what I need is not this. So this is the problem. What we need is to change this, to have these people in the center of the discussion. Let us be the one and who are partner with you on the on our life. To be honest, we are on a ship. You cannot say I am in the top roof and whatever people in the they do, I don't care because I am there. If something happened, all of us will be sinking, right? So I think it's important to bring their voices. Those people knows better than anyone else what they need, what is the problem, and they have the solution overall, but they need the opportunities, and this is what we're lacking. So being invited as like you are privileged to be here, it's something we need to shift it. It's our right to be here. We are the one who is affected. We are the one who needs to say what we need, what we don't, and to work together to see how we can achieve it. And this is why it's important for us to bring and recenter this, because also these people are not paralyzed, are not recipients, and they are really, really resilient instead. And they have the knowledge, they have the skills, they lacking the opportunity.
Mm. You made a very interesting point about people who have been displaced or people, refugees who are already in displacement, being impacted or being secondarily displaced again and again and again because of climate change. What are you seeing as the opportunities or the most important policy pieces that we're getting wrong about people who are already in displacement, who are now also suffering the consequences of climate change?
Yeah, actually, it's important for them. For example, do we think about protection issues because of the climate change?
Right.
Women, we are here talking about intersectionality again. Women who had these kind of problems, and there is lacking of fire or safe resources, energy resources, they have to go and collect the firewoods. While they are collecting the firewoods, which is far far away, and I saw that by my eyes in the Kiak 2 and in Kakuma camp, children are don't going to the school because of they have to do something else. There is no water in the schools. I was saying that women had to go far, far away to bring the fire food. Fire or food is even it's really dangerous because the tent most of the time is plastic. So what if something happened? Then you will have also security issue. Children, male, female, youth are lacking for the opportunity of training and all of these things because all of them now on platform and internet, but there is no electricity, so people had no access to that. It's a circle. So it's not only that climate change affecting or not on local community or refugees, it's affecting everyone, and it's instant effect and intersexual effect because everything is linked to everything. So if you need as a person working with refugee and work on the protection, you have to take care of the climate change because it might ended up by women being GBV, sexual gender based violence, or maybe working in the sex because they don't have money, they don't have work. And why it's important for migrants, because for refugees more than migrants, but all of them for sure they are having problems. But because there is a layers of problems for local, maybe they have the right to work in their community. But for refugees, sometimes and most of the time, they don't have right to go to the schools. They don't have right to be registered. They don't have documentation. They will not accepted to work, and they are prevented from working. And if you look also on LGBTIQ, sometimes they are ended up in a community where they are not even accepted. So I think it's a circle of layers of intersectional stuff that we need to look at it. It's not a simple thing. It's really complicated.
I mean, that resonates a lot with some of the research and the work that we've done in our organization. I'm taken back to some of the work we've done in Somalia, where we're looking at as climate change, people have been displaced by the war. Then, as climate changes or as you go through drought, are no longer in a position to ever go home, regardless of what's happening with the conflict. Their means of their way of life, right, and their professions, they can no longer practice them because of what's happened with climate change. And now they find themselves like urbanized, right, in an environment like in Mogadishu, with very little options, right? And the nature of the policy intervention is primarily about humanitarian assistance and not about development and trying to find and remake the economy in a way that they can participate. So it very much resonates with that experience of not seeing or understanding the intersectional challenges they're facing.
Politics is almost missed, seriously. So we thought that it's a climate change thing and that's it. I think I am a Syrian myself, and maybe, and there's a lot of reports now saying that maybe the conflict in Syria started by climate change. Because we already, before the war, we had a drought in a northern, eastern part of Syria, and I think that's made a lot of and a huge of demand on cities, which is other cities, and people are really lacking opportunity, work opportunity. And as you said and mentioned about development, there is not a lot of sustainable projects. So I think that makes some like stress, and maybe afterwards we have so many things, but it's not about just the war started after. But I thought, and we had a lot of researcher also think that it is having a link with the climate change. So yes, climate change might relate even political problems or like wars or, as you said, conflicts. So we need to think about it all together, and we have to look and have a bigger image, if we can say, not only I am working on climate change and that's it. So my work is here. Everything is linked.
Thank you. That's great. Shakarul, so tell us a little bit about your work, but in particular, this intersection between migrant workers and climate change, and how it is, raising issues of protection, but also changing in the way in which they think about possibilities.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for inviting me in this panel. And before starting, I just want to show my tag that this is the outcome of our research, migration, not a choice, but it's a compulsion. And this is from our research that we have conducted very recently. And it was a longitudinal research, so that we can capture all the seasons around the year, and find what are the climate change happened in different seasons, and what are the impacts on the changes of climate in different seasons. And that's why we stayed in the community, we belong to the community to understand more. For example, if I talk about the rising of temperature nowadays, so if you go to that particular area in the Sundarbans, in the mangrove forest, you will find that the heat is, it's more than it's around 50 degree, but when the sun actually hit the groundwater, the surface water, and water is saline. It's very much
Hmm.
saline water, and then it make evaporation, and it really create unenable situation, unbearing situation. So you cannot, or I cannot express in my papers what is the feeling. So that's why we went there, we stayed there to understand feelings, what about the changes of climate, and what is the impact on our lives. So I will say that it's not only the heat, the salinization is really intensified in that particular area. There are many reasons, because of tidal surge, because of storm surge, because of sea level rise. So water are coming into the areas, and everything is being salinized. And in there and also river erosion is a big issue, that are actually destroying the uh, homeland, destroying their farmland, so they don't have any livelihood options there. So in that situation, I mean, the climate change has a clear impact on the losses of assets, losses of livelihoods, and losses of well-being. And if I talk about what is well-being, just let me give one example. Uh, about the health of the women and the girl, because of the use of saline water in that particular area. So, because of the uses of saline water, the young girls, I mean, lost their skin. I mean, they have some skin problems. So even if in their early 20s they looks like older than 40, so that's a big issue. So that's why the families, they actually marry their young girl, adolescent girl, early ages, so that they can avoid this kind of situation. Because if they are more than 20 years, they will look like 40 years, and nobody will be interested to marry them. So that actually forced them to marry in the early age. And when it is early marriage, then it is early pregnancy. And if it is early pregnancy, it means that there are many complications, and the people have very less ability to get treatment if they face any difficulties in this kind of situation. On the other hand, there is a huge impact on reproductive health of the women because of using the saline water in their everyday life. And there is no money for treatment, there is no healthcare facility in that particular remote area, so they need to go far away for treatment. But again, if we talk about the reproductive health of women, that is a taboo in our culture. So they are not open, they cannot tell to the doctor, they cannot go to even they cannot share with their husbands or the families. So all these invisible impacts are there because of the climate change. And uh, uh, when this is the situation that there is no livelihoods, no well-being, so people actually take decision for migration. And it's, again, I will say, it's not by choice, it's of course compelled. Because before going there, before migrating, they try to stay, and most of the cases they rely on taking loans to rebuild their houses, or restart their livelihood opportunities. But before paying off their loan, the next disaster comes and destroy again. So in that way, they actually fall into a debt trap situation. And when they have a lot of debt traps on back, they have no other viable options or adaptation in the community. So what they will do, they leave. Usually they go to a new city, they go to a new district to work. But there is also a recent trend that many people are migrating internationally. And our research is saying that the people who migrated in 2022 and the people who migrated in 23, it's like 65% increase of international migration within
Wow.
12 months. And in terms of the international migration, there is no regular pathway except the labor migration pathway, right? There is no specific rules, regulations for the climate induced migration. So that's why the people take the traditional labor migration route, and which is very much unethical and unfair recruitment practices, and they actually fall into a double trap of debt. And when they are in the destination country, our research is saying that 81% people who migrate from that particular climate vulnerable area to Middle East countries particularly, 81% they didn't get any job work permit.
Mm.
So that means that they have been fraud. And when they don't have any work permit, they become undocumented. And when they are undocumented, the exploitation is higher. They are not getting salary after work. They're being forced. They're working under threat, uh, and so many issues. And we have a lot of cases that the family members actually asked help from us to manage a job in the destination country because they do not want to return back. Because if they return back, how will they pay the loan? But there is no solution at our hand. It's only the governments who can ensure the protection of the migrant workers, it both the governments of the origin countries and the governments of the destination countries. So, and if I talk about the legal framework, in terms of the climate change, there are many uh, uh, wonderful policy and legal framework even in Bangladesh, in our country. And if I talk about the labor migration, there are also very nice policies and framework, but there is no connection. There is completely disconnect. And that's why the people who are being compelled to migrate in a climate change situation, there is no protection for them. So it's not only the case of international migration. If I talk about the internal migration, the people who migrate internally within the country, they usually end up in informal sector work. It means that they're working in the harvest agriculture sector, they're working in the brick lane, they're working in other sectors, and the informal sector work is excluded in the labor law in Bangladesh. So even if they face any exploitation, they have no way to fastly complain to get any remedy or compensation. So that's the situation, and that's why my organization, OCUP, is a grassroots migrant organization, has been working to uh, to uh, to uh, disseminate that, when we talk about migration, everybody think, oh, it's economic migration. That is a perception that it's voluntary migration. Our research is uh, shows that the people are being being forced to migrate in the context of uh, climate change, because there is no other viable option, there is no other adaptation and coping mechanism, sustainable coping mechanism in the community. So that's the thing, that we need to raise these issues. And yes, I mean, again, in the globalist tech talk, migration is not again clear, but my participation in this COP is basically to raise these issues and bring people more in our core that migration is compulsion in the context of climate change, is not a voluntary economic.
Well, that's really powerful. So, in essence, you have a situation where the impacts of climate change are becoming sort of comprehensive, right? And with a number of secondary impacts that may not be perceived from the beginning. For example, not just on loss of livelihoods, but the health, et cetera, driving people into situations of increased vulnerability, and the coping mechanisms, such as child marriage, then become increase the vulnerability of those who are involved. The internal pathways, in terms of like migrating for labor opportunities internally, don't offer protection. And now the pathways that exist at the international level, the labor migration pathways, just simply aren't fit for purpose and don't include protection measures. When in essence, what we're seeing is not a voluntary decision to move somewhere in search of a better job. It is they're being compelled. In essence, we're in a situation of like forcible displacement, and we just simply don't have the mechanisms or the pathways to provide protection once you're in that situation. That's fascinating. I mean, I found also particular the numbers. You said 65% increase
Yes, in
uh,
1 year.
in 1 year
Yes.
of out migration.
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's very powerful. Look, so all of these points really like bring us back to at least a couple of fundamental questions, and one is how and where are the biggest opportunities for affected communities to play a role in the policymaking process that you see, and where does more work need to be done to open those up? So maybe we can start with you, just talk a little bit, Marcella, about those opportunities when it comes to youth in affected communities in Guatemala.
I think that the biggest opportunity for youth is like the spaces where we can raise our voice, visibilize the problems, our problematics, climate problematics from the communities. So yes, I think the best we can do is raise our voices that way. I mean, having places in the government. I mean, like I think that my participation at the COP is something that it's really important in this case because they are allowing the youth to participate in these kinds of events, these kinds of negotiations. They are letting us to raise our voices because I'm representing the Guatemalan youth, because I'm allowing the youth to speak through me. So yes, I think that we can do that. That's the most important thing that youth can do. Yes, raise our voices every time because that's what we can do actually. So yes, I think that's the biggest opportunity for youth because I mean we are still growing as youth. We have a lot of things to learn, but we have to have this kind of places to make a role. You know, so I think that this is a really great opportunity at the COP. I think, for example, when we get all these things like knowledge. Sorry, I'm thinking in Spanish, but all this knowledge I think that what we can do is use it to our communities. That's my role here actually. I'm going to give everything I've learned here to my platform and do something about it. Do our projects in our communities, because yes, that's what I think. That's what we can do as youth, Guatemalan youth, Latin American youth, work with what we have. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Shaza, same question for you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think there is no one fit all. We need to think on tailor-made approaches within the context of each country, each situation. And as I said before, changing and shifting the power, looking at the refugees or the affected community as an agent of change instead of looking at them as the recipients, and then people had to receive and passive, like just sitting and receiving assistance. So once we change our approach, I think so many things will be changed. First of all, those people will be included from the beginning till the end. What I mean, from the beginning of making the decision, from organizing the decision, just sitting together to look what we need to do, then implementing. So all of us need to be implementing these together,
Hmm.
co reviewing or what we said. I lost words. So then come together to review what we had and then say, like, yes, we did the job, good or not. This is also something. So it's from A to Z, and the decision making process should be an equal partnership with refugees. In addition to that, we need as a NGO or any stakeholders, maybe to include the state community with our team, because also they will do kind of shift of the approach within your work. Hiring them, giving them the opportunities. And I think also we need to think about the other laws or like localization or refugee-led organization or whoever working on the ground to be also financed and giving the power to achieve what they are need to achieve. Training and awareness session, I think, is something we need to work on. Just give them, I don't want to say capacity building. Sometimes I am against this word because sometimes people already had the capacity, but maybe capacity sharing, because also this kind of capacity need to be go to the stakeholders as well. So I am as a stakeholders, I thought always I know everything, but maybe if we sit together, we can share our capacities, our knowledge. So also sharing the capacity or giving them some training if they are lacking the training, and give us also some training to know about those communities is also something we need to work on. So in short, we can say changing the approaches, shifting the power, like tailor made according to the context, awareness, capacity sharing, and also that financing. So when we give them finance to work, almost refugees and local people are working on voluntarily basis. I don't know why we have to. And if you ask for any money, everyone look at you like, oh, how dare you say that? Like supposedly you have to work for free. This is what I know, and then I will have your work forever. Once you said, but I cannot do that anymore, then they will say like, no, we cannot give you money, you are not registered, you are not, I don't know what, then all of this barriers coming. So I think also we need to take off all of these barriers towards working as our laws. We don't have core funding, then they will ask us for reporting every time and doing like media and social media flyers and things and that. We have no languages sometimes, experts. We don't have money to do all of this. This is all cost a lot of money. Then we will be seen like, yeah, so you see, you are not accountable. You cannot do these things. I cannot do it. But if you give me co-funding, I can hire people can do it. I can do whatever you want, but I have no money on voluntarily basis. And this is something we also forget about it. Those people who's doing the job on voluntarily basis, such like me, I left. Uh, I have to think in Arabic. I have a leave now from my official work
Hmm.
to be here. but I will not be paid to be here because I'm doing this job as a voluntarily. I cannot always risk my life because I also have to pay a rent. I have to pay my expenses. So this is something also we didn't see it. Like these are the laws. It's not like they are not angels coming from the himmel, and they don't eat, they don't drink, they don't need anything. These people needs to run for their families. But even though they give their money, they dedicate their time to do something, they come and see, you know what, they are not that much accountable. And I am afraid maybe they will not be okay with finance and things like that. So this is what we need to change. And this is how we can have them the opportunity and let us see if they are capable or not and accountable or not.
Mm.
And accountability is something we need to shift it. Accountability for those people, accountability not for donors. So what I'm even here stressing on, we all work just to give the donors the relief that your money spent well. Like even if we, I remember when we were working, sometimes at the end of the year, you will have crazy just to spend a lot of money, and we like sometimes just build a wall. I don't know why we have to have the wall. We have to spend the money, something like that. Why we didn't give this money for people? No, this has another budget line, and like okay, so people are suffering, needing money, but we cannot because this is another budget line. So I think there is a lot of things we need to shift it, and we be accountable for people, for displaced people. We need to ask them if they are happy with our services or not. They are accountable, then they are really deserve to have more funding. How I can see it.
The question of accountability and are we accountable? Are those who are involved in the aid industry, are they accountable to the donors? Or are they accountable to affected communities? And part of the real push to have affected communities at the heart of the policymaking process. And as you say, both co-creation of policy, but then also implementation, and then accountability for the actual results, that's a co-implemented process. That's all fundamentally about trying to shift the perspective, right? About where accountability lies, to the donors or to the affected populations. So thank you for raising those points. And we'll come back to the question of financing, which I think is critical moving forward. Shakarul, tell us a little bit. I mean, your research is fascinating. How do you think about that, taking that research and also the level of community mobilization that you have and actually making policy change? Like, where are the opportunities or the moments for influencing the policy debate?
Thank you. And I really like the title of this session, Nothing About Us Without Us. And this is in our heart. This is the center of our organization. And we as an organization come together with the same idea that we need to bring our voice, bring our perspectives in the policy discourse and policy and the implementation of the projects. Because, very often the programs and policies are developed from the top level people, and they have no idea what is the ground reality, what people need and how they would need. So most of the cases it's like top down approaches, and then they bring us with a project like with a bag with their own ideas, and that's just want to sell with us. They don't think that yes, whether we as a community need or not. So that's why we always work to I mean bring the issue of bottom up approach, so that the needs of the community are being reflected. I completely agree with you that yes, the accountability is to the communities, because we all are working to the communities. And being a migrant son, I belong to the community, and I also belong to the climate induced community. So I always think that yes, it's not something that the donors, the partners, they will come with their own logical framework to implement and uh, to implement and get results. Rather, it should develop together, uh, you know, considering the real need on the ground. So that's something that we really follow want to do. And in terms of bringing our voice, I mean, we are trying our best to bringing our voice through different methods. For example, community-led research and evidence-based advocacy at different levels. We in the context of climate change in our project area, we are organizing the youth people. We call it climate advocates. So we are providing different kind of orientation so that they have better understanding of this use, and then they are now planning what they will do. For example, in the case of World Environment Day, so they came together, they discuss and decide what they should do to bring these issues at least at the Upazila level, I mean the local government level, and then they are planning how they will bring their stories at national level and beyond. So they are using social media. They are collecting photos in different seasons, and organizing photo exhibitions, storytelling issues. So I mean, the youth in that particular community are being engaged in different way so that they can really bring their own voices, they can really bring their own perspective in the discourse. But again, what is needed, particularly in the context of the countries like ours, that the policymakers need to be much more sensitized. They need to be passionate to listen to the community before they take initiatives for any policy changes or any designing of project. But I think there is a huge gap. Very often we as a community think, oh, we don't have anything to say because we are not educated, we are not so much intelligent. How can we contribute to this kind of issues? So that's a perception, that's a mindset. But I think it is time to rethink, to reverse the perception that no, the community has their own power, the community has their own experiences and own knowledge that can be actually utilized by the policymakers to make a better solution, to make a sustainable solution for the community.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, right? Because so often, and this goes back to some of the points that Shaza you were making at the beginning, about how the system is designed to think about, we said, well, you don't like the term capacity building, right? Because it's this idea that somehow you need to build the capacity of the community or these organizations to implement, when in fact, this may very well be a question of building the capacity of donors and aid agencies to actually be responsive to what communities need and to be able to center communities in what they're doing. The work actually needs to happen amongst the policymakers and the aid community as opposed to need to happen in with the communities themselves. It's a question of making that part of the architecture fit for purpose to be responsive to needs that the communities have identified. Because frankly, it's not only do the communities know their needs better, but they have a much more sort of granular sense of what's going to work. And if you're not listening to that, your policy, it's not only the sort of wrong thing to do to not listen to it, but it's also the dumb thing to do to not listen to that input so that your policies aren't going to be effective.
Yeah, just one thing I want to say that in our context, I mean, if any project designs for the women empowerment and then women livelihood, it's like that everybody comes with a sewing machine. So I mean, even if the women like yeah doesn't like that and don't need it, or there's no demand of having this kind of sewing machine in that particular rural area, how much they will earn with this? But, something that they are bringing with their own ideas, but they don't never think what what the women has the skills, the interest, and what they can do, even considering the local uh, market viability and all these things. So that's one kind of example that is always uh, perception and mindset and their own interest, I will say.
Understood. So let's very quickly open it. I've got a bunch of additional questions for you, but first, if we're going to open it up to the audience, if anyone in the audience has some questions, this would be a great time to take them. Maybe we could pass the mic to. Go ahead and
Hi.
identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Matthew Scott from the Raoul Wallenberg Institute in Sweden. Thanks so much for having the panel. I haven't got a prepared question, but some reflection that, first of all, to say thank you for the contributions, emphasizing the local level and the importance of participation. It seems to me like we're talking about multiple different kind of scenarios where different, and I think I've heard that from the panel as well, different kinds of ways you can have or imagine local led leadership. I mean, you were talking, now I can't see the names up there anymore, but it's Shaza, I think, from the Global Refugee Led Initiative, about what seems more like kind of interlocution with donors and projects and this kind of thing, where it feels like there should be structure in place for this kind of thing. I mean, everybody who works in this space knows about participation and refugee led initiatives, and what's the barrier then is a question too. Why isn't it happening? I mean, Hardin, you were saying, maybe we can capacity build the donors. They know it. Why isn't it happening? And you talk about the budget lines, and everybody knows that as well. What needs to shift to make that real? Maybe we needed to have them sitting here. Uh, and your point seems to be different, because here we see something, maybe not maybe on a bigger scale. We're talking international movement, we're talking movement within Bangladesh, and the number of actors who are engaged in this massive and complex and variable dynamic of climate related mobility into cities, within cities, internationally, as you're describing it. It's enormous. You've got some labor mobility organizations. I mean, the ILO could have a role to play in this protection of labor migrants, maybe. But cities, what dimension, what part of the city is responsible for people coming in? Housing authorities, is there a housing authority? Who do you interact with as a climate migrant in a city in Bangladesh? So that's a kind of question there, and it might be the same. We heard some interesting points about youth in other settings yesterday. About the kind of psychosocial dimension there, and service delivery, and hearing the voices of young people in that kind of local environment. Who's listening? Sorry to throw three questions out spontaneously, but there's so much wealth in the panel that it'd be great to hear if time permits.
That's great. Thanks very much. So, who wants to tackle this first?
Yeah, I would go with the order. So thanks for the question. And yes, and maybe like strongly and bravely, I can say shifting the power is something like prevent people to look and to open up because they are thinking that we are threatened. And this is something also is not right because what we are calling for is equal partnership with all stakeholders. We believe that one hand cannot clap alone, so this is what we need. And for the educate or capacity sharing or whatever with the donors, with the stakeholders. This is what we are also doing in the GRN and Global Refugee Led Network. We create skill up training, and this training is goes for both. Like there is some sessions going to for refugee leaders or like community leaders to know what they need and how they can create their own initiatives and bravely. And I like the point where you said that we were systematically like built to see like we are like hopeless, we cannot do anything, we are like ignorant, and this is what we need to change from our side as well because always we feel, "Oh, but he's Sweden, he knows better for sure, like we're in Syria, we don't know, those people knows everything." So this is how we feel, this is how we think. Believe me, I'm not exaggerating. So I think first of all we need to work on both sides, it's not only one way. So we need to give us trust that people trust that they can do because there is a lot of amazing things. Maybe we don't know like the Western people or the global North how to name stuff in a catchy way, like recycling. All my grandmother do recycling, right? But we don't know that that was a recycling, which is like everyone now, yeah, change your bottle, have this. It's a recycling. I remember we always use like the same bottle, which is glass, like we put oil in it, then we clean it, then we have a water in it, and so on and so forth. We didn't have any like any tool. I don't. You got me.
Hmm.
We use it for everything, like clothes. It's not. It's hard or it's not okay, so I will do it for my sister, and then I can clean it. I clean the what. This is what we have. So I think so far donors, they have a little bit shift. I can see it now because I'm started like 5 years ago, and I see how they are now more open for that. But who will say we need to share the capacity? First, you need to see that yourself is capable as a refugee-led organization. Then we had the guidelines for meaningful participation for all sectors. So also you can go to our website and see the guidelines. And now we try to have a checkbox, so maybe easier for people to know as a stakeholders how I can be meaningfully including a community or like refugee or whatever. So first we need to be feeling trust in ourselves so we can share such information, and then approaches now to the to the stakeholders, and let them be open. Not all of them are happy to do so, but they are starting. As every time, this is the benefit of trending. So because the meaningful participation is trendy nowadays, so everyone would like to do it, maybe at the beginning as a tokenization, but maybe afterwards it's working. So what we are playing on now, this kind of trendy stuff, so we do kind of with the municipality training, so we with the donors and with different actors, but it's still a power shifting threat. So far they don't feel, especially NGOs and other like donors, maybe they are now thinking more like which better to go directly or through the middleman. But for the middleman is here the question, because they feel like what if direct fund go directly to local. So that's why they are more open now to have more refugees or more local community, which is good if they take it in the right way. It's what we need. It's what we call for.
Okay, thank you. I mean, in terms of your questions, how the city will tackle this kind of movement, and yes, in Bangladesh context, it's very small country, only 147,000 square kilometer, but we have 160 million people, so it's overcrowded. And because of the climate change, now people are moving into the cities, and then city is really, really overcrowded. And in terms of the interventions, I think yes, the Dhaka city mayor is present in this conference, and he was saying the other day that every day 20,000 people come into Dhaka to stay. And I will say that yes, there is uh, no facility for them. Actually, most of them are ended up in a slum, and which is I mean, there is no access to basic human rights facilities in these slums, so they ended up in really a very bad situation. uh, but my point, and even there are many projects actually implementing to improve the situation of the people in that slums. But th- my point is, we really need to think the real life change, how we can make sure the real life change. Most of the cases, the projects are very much on paper rather than the impacts on the lives of the people. And in terms of the sustainability, it's again, it's paper based sustainability. So that's why I was giving a reference that if you provide a swing machine to 10 people, to 10 women in Islam, uh, or more than 10 people, 10 women, then how they will earn? Because who will come to them for making dress or something? How they will earn? So it means that, I mean, we really need to think of the solutions based on the need of the people. and how they look like their life, what they really want to do in terms of their livelihoods. This is fundamental, I think, because as an organization, we really believe that uh, we cannot provide money every day to everybody. It's not possible. Rather, we want to give skills and capacities so that they can use the skills and capacities for their livelihood, for their career. And if they have these options, these skills, they can try both in the countries of origin, like in their home country, or in destination. And even if they have this kind of skills, and they have the have employment scopes, then they can actually decide for the well-being of themselves. But again, yeah, there should have a very good system in the settings, particularly in urban settings and the slum settings, so that for example, the healthcare facility, the schooling for the children, and the other facilities should have but I I I I I always put emphasis on the choice of the people, so that they can take their own decisions. It's not that I will decide for them. So that's the fundamental thing that we believe in, and we work in. And that's why, for the climate youths, we have a interventions like a very participatory orientation on career counseling, because the people in the particularly the youth in the coastal area, they don't have any dream at this moment. Because uh, uh, mm, one story, if time allows, is like that a boy completed his secondary education, and his father was a carpenter. So after the secondary education, the father was forcing him to join as a carpenter, to work with him. The boy was confused, because he was thinking, if I join with my father, then I will become a carpenter, and the whole life will 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 be as like as my father. And he was not actually thinking that yes, he will be carpenter. So they actually, he came to us, and then we discussed what he want to do. And he decided that in the village, now many people use mobile phones, right? And then they need servicing of their phones very often, and they need to go to the nearby towns, and there is no servicing center here. So if I have the skills for mobile servicing, then I can start something here. Then we actually provided some kind of stipend, so that he can actually take the skills. And after that, we didn't have enough money to provide to start a shop. But for that, he went to the Brooklyn for 6 months to work and earn some money. And with that money, he started a small shop for mobile servicing, and it was into 2029. And I thought that during the COVID, he has lost and everything is vanished. But I went there in last year, and I found that it has been a bigger one, and he actually created more space opportunities for other for youths. And he said that yes, I am lucky that I got this kind of stipend from the organizations like yours, but there are many others like me, and they don't have any scope. So that's why I have created this opportunity for them, so that they can learn and they can work. So this kind of spirit is really important to build moment or movement in response to this kind of situation. So thank you.
That's great. So I really like how that story um, sort of juxtaposes, with the idea of like developing a little bit of money, a little bit of funding to get something off the ground to repair mobile phones versus the sewing machine intervention, right? And which policy there is the more effective, and why is it effective? Because fundamentally it was designed at the community level as opposed to being developed like in a program budget formulation process. Do you want to jump in on this,
Oh, yes,
please?
it's fine. The question was, who's listening? Well, actually, it's really difficult to make our voices be heard. In Guatemala, we have this situation. Actually, I was thinking about it during your intervention. But being a youth advocate or an activist, as you want to call it, it's really difficult, especially being young. Why? Because in Guatemala and Latin America, it's very dangerous to raise our voices. So that's why that is one reason why a lot of people migrate, because we need to be safe, right? So we need to create this kind of network of environmentalists and being safe, try to be safe, because it's really difficult to make our voices be heard. That's why I know that I made a lot of work to be here. That's why I'm here representing youth, because yes, I worked really, really hard to be here and to represent. So I think I want to be heard. I have been working with my ministry, environmental ministry of my country, but I think it's really difficult, right, to be heard. That's why we need to create actions and visibilize everything, because we are working. Actually, there are documents that says everything what we need. For example, there's an observation 26, where the people recognize the environment as a human right for children. Why? Because they recognize that the environment is something that is really necessary to get your human rights. So we need to make visible these kind of documents, because right? The policy, I mean, the environmental policy in my country, it's really inexistent, I might say. But I think, yes, we need to be heard with policymakers, because it's really important, right? Them to recognize how youth and climate change are really together. For example, I have to say, I didn't mention, but I work at another organization, Alianzas Escazú Guatemala, which is a organization that works for the Escazú Agreement. That is one that is looking for taking care of the human rights of the advocates and taking care of the communities, also promoting democracy with environment. So yes, for example, I can say that I'm part of it. I'm part of the communication team, and they let me get in, and I'm really proud of it, because I know that I'm able to speak with another young people that they are interested in this, because it's really important. We care about it. We are the future, and we need to raise our voices. That's what I have been saying, because it's true. I mean, we are really creative. We are, I don't know. We have a lot of hope. I know that we can work together. I mean, it's we need to learn a lot of things. I know, but we're able to. That's why, yes, I think we can work together and do it. But yes, it's really hard. But we have to work really, really hard, as I said. But we can make our voices be heard. So, who's listening now? I can say that I made something good with my government, because I'm here. So I think we can do it.
That's a really powerful point. I mean, in particular, I really liked your, yeah. So quite often, organizations like mine, we think about protection in terms of people who need protection because they've been forcibly displaced from a particular context. And what I hear you saying is, in order for, being able to center the voices of youth and affected communities in this policy process, it's also a human rights issue. You have to have the rights and the protection and the ability to speak up around these issues and have access to policymakers and others, because there are many environments in which folks don't necessarily want to hear that, right? And the response to that is not necessarily, it's one that could put people and some of these activists in danger. So thank you for surfacing that point. Are there other questions from the audience? Benjamin? Sure. Where do we pass them?
Thank you, just so you can
Thank
hear
you.
me because I'm losing my voice. And thank you for the perspective you shared so far. I'm wondering, and we talk about this quite a bit in our work with Refugees International, how we develop consultative processes that surface and come to consensus, or maybe not consensus, among displaced people and communities, how we recognize the diversity of perspectives, because having one representative of a displaced community can't speak for everyone, and there's always, even within the people in this room or in our communities here, disagreements about the best way to approach something or the best solutions to problems. And so, those forms of democratic processes and debate are really important, but how do we foreground that and develop those processes in the space for that to happen, and then to push for that with other outside communities.
So, if you
Please.
allow me, so maybe um, from our experience as a global refugee-led network, we never said that we are the representative of the refugees because no one can do. But what we said that we are voice of refugees for the voiceless people. So whoever want to be with us, then they will say yes. But for sure, we know that there is many difference, and this is how it's happened with us when we started this movement, if we can say at the beginning. We were coming together from all over the globe. So this is how we start the story of the GRN. So we brought refugee from all over, refugee leaders and representative from all over the world to come together for the summit, global summit for refugees. The first one by refugees for refugees, and it's one that was like totally refugee co-organized and so on. While we were discussing, we saw the problems. There is a lot of, as you said, like disconnecting from each other. All of them have a problem with the housing, but everyone has his context. He has different kind of problems. In Germany, I am in Germany based. We don't have houses even. Like the problem is to find a house, but once you find it, maybe it's easier. Maybe discrimination going there from my case. But for example, for some other religions, we know that there is other problem where there is no housing at all. Like they are not allowed to rent even the refugees or migrants. So this is why we are working on 6 regions. So we work on regional base, and each region have their also like local, national, and so on and so forth. So this is how I think as a system we need to. You cannot just bring someone from whenever and just call him. And seeking asylum, we are different. As a Syrian, I have different policies implemented on me rather than the Somalia. Yemen, they are having a lot of problems, but never being considered as refugees, for example. So you cannot come to me in Germany as a representative for refugees, and there is asylum seeker from Yemen, and I have to speak about her. I don't know her problems, but what I can do, and this is what we do, we try to work on local level. So we bring all refugees who can be or the leaders to come together and say, look, what we have, and this is what we have doing recently. Like we have summits. If you go to our website, you will see that there is a global summit and there is a regional summits, and the regional summits also based on national and local. So we tried every now and then to bring people together and ask them what problems you want to tackle. First, they are choosing the problems. Second, they come together, and then everyone can speak about himself, his community. As a Yemeni, I have this and this. As a Syrian, I face this and this. As a black person, I face this and this. Because as a woman with hijab, I face discrimination. Maybe black women will also will face it, but in different ways. Like I will have, yeah. So we have common problems, but we have a different context. So this is what how you can tackle. You cannot just check the box, and this is what we have seen so far. I just bring whenever I'm going. You know what? Last minute, come with me. I will have a refugee in the panel.
Yeah.
Sit. This is how it works. But it is not. Maybe I will not be here in the panel, but maybe the work you do, bringing the voices from local and then national and then regional and the global, and maybe someone else can speak in my problems is here presented. It's not about me here as a person to be presented. It's about the community, the problems of them. So I think this is how like if we can say intersectionality. So also the AGD approach should be implemented. So also it's not about just from local to international, but also from different groups. So voices of children need to be reflected, voices of elderly who if never been like represented, if we can say disabled people, hardly you can see disabled people. And it's also about disabled people with a physical thing. So there's a lot of disabled people with invisible disability are not even reflected and reflected. So this is something that we need to work on, like intersectional approach. This is the way how we can move forward and keep it like continuously. Like it's not one time before GRF, it's not one time before COP. It should be beyond. It should be a process for every time. So when COP or when GRF coming, I am already prepared. It's not like a lazy student just study and he be surprised by the exam tomorrow. I think this is how it should be. If you need to add.
Uh, okay. What was the question?
So, yeah, it's the idea that you have, the refugee-led or affected community, just those movements, right? There's so many diversity of views
Yeah.
inside of it. How do you work to channel and to respect those diversity of views as you put forward the policy recommendations? And I will say, I think this is a really important question because quite often there is almost an excuse, right, and inside the international aid architecture to say, well, who are you to represent? Yeah, who represents refugees or who represents affected communities? And quite often to me, that sounds a bit like people looking for a reason or a way or an excuse not to try harder, to listen, not to, you know, capacity build on the architecture side to hear those voices and bring them in by simply saying the problem's too hard.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really complex. I mean, each and every community has their own need, has their own perspective, and the context. What she said, that yes, we don't say that yes, we are the representative of the migrants or climate induced migrants community, but we are the voices of this community. And uh, uh, and in our context, actually, we really try to bring everybody on board to listen their problems. For example, if I talk about the women and girl in our particular communities, what kind of problems they are facing because of the climate change. And I will say that yes, the main problem is the reproductive health issues because of using the saline water. And then what they really need, do they need a doctor, do they need a money, or what they do need? And then uh, uh, it was a discussion and came up, okay, it's better if you provide us some sort of orientation so then we can prevent infections out of these. And then we actually designed the curriculum or training based on the local traditional knowledge, so that it's very easy, it's common to follow, right? And then after providing training to a few groups, to certain group, like three groups and 30 into three, and 90 women. And then when we asked them, then they said, okay, it's very helpful. And it's not only we 90 people need to know, it's better if you organize this orientation for every woman in the community, because everybody knows to need needs to know it. So this is something, if you go to the young adolescent, that's their perspective is different, their demand is different, they think their future in different way. So and then if you go to the elderly man, then yes, why you are staying in this difficult situation? Why not you are interested to migrate? I mean, just that was my question. And the one person, he was saying that we are the scientists here,
Mm.
Sundarbans, because we know how to fish in the Sundarban, and which fish should we catch and which fish should we don't, right? And we know what are the resources in these mangrove. So that's why I want to stay, I want to live on this, because I have learned from my father, from my grandfather. So I do not want to leave this. So these kind of varieties are there, dimensions are there, and we need to respect everything. And based on that, actually, we need to design our support, how we will provide support, uh, who want to stay back because it's their right to stay. So if someone want to stay in their own community in this climate impacted situation, then what kind of support they need and they actually expect. So we need to design in that way. On the other hand, the youth who don't have any future, they are desperate to live for a better future, for a better life, right? So if they want to live, then what should we do actually? Where they will live, and with what kind of skills or what kind of needs they need. So all these, and I mean, in our context, we try to engage with the community in that way so that we can reflect their needs uh, on ground page, right? So yeah, if so I'll stop then if you have any more further questions.
So, do you want to jump in or? Sure.
As I said at the beginning, I'm the leader of this platform, Agentes Eco or Agents ECO. But with my community, we are trying to create opportunities for the young people to insist, to make policy, for them to create this project and to make their voices be heard. That's what we're doing. I mean, as the leader, I'm able to create all the basis for this platform, this national platform, because what we want to do is get to the climate change. I don't know the name in English, but I mean, it's a place of the government that treats all the climate change things. Um, I know the name in Spanish, but okay.
Say it in Spanish.
It's el Consejo Nacional de Cambio Climático. That's what we're trying to get to make a place for the youth. So
Like at the national council at the national level. Yeah, exactly.
exactly, that's what we want to do. So yes, I would like to make them to understand a little bit about policy. Why? Because if you're going to talk about environment, you will always talk about policy. So I think that we and communication, because I also think that the link between communication and science is something like really really important, especially for the youth. I mean, you have a lot of technical terms that the people usually doesn't really know. You need to translate it. I know it because I'm a journalism student, but I also were a biology student, so I really can't understand that. So yes, that what we're trying to do. I'm trying to make this. Um, well, I want to make these opportunities because the children, youth, they really have a lot of things to do in Guatemala and the world. So yes, I think that that's what I'm doing in my community now, and I hope to make to also still making projects because at the end I would like to make well some impact with my communities, with indigenous communities
Yeah,
because they are really vulnerable, and I think that we are not really taking care of it in my country. So I think that's important.
that's great. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're getting close to time. So what I'd like to do very quickly is I'm going to summarize some of the main points that I heard in the conversation, and then open up very quickly to you all to say if I missed anything or there are key points to drive home, and then we can close out at that point. So in terms of the nature of the challenge and the impact, in terms of the intersection between displacement, climate change, affected communities, I heard a real sort of underscoring the generational impacts, right, and how the impact is differentiated across generations, and the importance of including youth in the conversation from the get-go. Two, that the impact of this is intersectional, right? That it's touching the vulnerability to climate change and displacement, touches on any numbers of different sectors or issues. And that if you don't take a comprehensive approach to that intersectionality, you're going to miss huge dimensions of the vulnerability in the response. And then in terms of the impact, also that there are so many secondary impacts, right? When we think about and unintended consequences, that when we think about climate change and how it's impacting, say, that's not just the destruction of livelihoods, but it's also the health and the ripple effect of that through various types of vulnerability, both inside of countries and then when people try to move outside of countries, that if we don't take that comprehensive perspective, we're really missing the nature of the vulnerability and that really policy interventions, like like very little that's out there in the architecture is actually fit for purpose, right? Whether it's the type of solutions that are being designed at sort of headquarters levels by aid agencies and being implemented down, or when we talk about the kind of pathways that are available. If you're relying on labor pathways to deal with what in essence are protection issues and people who are forcibly displaced, you're sort of those tools don't match, right, in terms of the problems they're trying to solve. And then also a real emphasis on the urbanization issue, right, and how like that's beginning that the nature of displacement is changing fundamentally inside of countries because of it. And then when we talk about the policy solutions, a real call for tailor-made solutions, a real call for much deeper levels of accountability, right, inside of the system, and that accountability isn't necessarily by aid agencies to donors, but to affected communities. And as part of that accountability, real emphasis on co-creation, co-implementation, and co-evaluation of affected communities and leaders in those projects. A, the need for almost like a hyper focus on the local, or like a focus on the hyper local in designing solutions and really listening to communities, um, and then making sure that the policy interventions really underscore the agency of affected communities and their implementation and their design. Um, yeah, did I miss anything? Any other points you want to leave us with?
No, I don't think you're missing anything. Everything's fine. Sorry, my mind was in another place now. But yes.
Chantal, you anything else you want to?
Yeah, maybe the sustainability is like one of the like outcome of implementing the right approaches, if we can say, because as we see from the example that this guy he created his job, because mostly we are based on project, and then when there is no funding for this project anymore, then the project is just gone, so it's like not sustainable. And the second is about, as you said, it's an excuse to say those people are not represented, so the structure of representation could be also questioned or be discussed, because we are here, and it's not an excuse to say I cannot work. Who I bring Shaza? Why I exclude Rachel? Or why? So why you need to exclude? I cannot understand. You can bring me and bring others. Maybe you can go to even not me and him, like someone else. But it's not an excuse to say I don't have an structure, so I can have them in the discussion. So I think this is also one of the call that we need to see how we can work with the existing like ways or structure of representation, instead of just excluding them because we don't have the
Mm.
right structure in our mind as a North Global, and this is not how we want it to be. So I think this is something we need to focus on.
Okay. Shahrul, do you want to take us out?
Just thank you very much. It was really wonderful summary from you. I just want to mention that we really make sure the coherence, policy coherence from
Mm,
international level to local level,
hmm.
so that it's really impacted, and the true meaning uh, of the title. I mean, the translation of the title in different levels, including
Yeah.
the local level. That would be really good. That nothing about us without us. We really want to reflect this in all the policy procedures and implementation of the project. So that's all. Thank you very
And
much.
in a way, that's partially an answer, right, to one of the questions that was raised earlier about the complexity of actors, whether they're like at the international aid architecture or in municipalities or cities or at the local level, that in essence, you don't have to design all that correctly from the outset. You just have to make sure that they're inclusive and that those who are affected have a role in the policy process. And that rule in of itself could pay huge dividends in terms of like how smart and how effective the interventions are moving forward. So thank you very
And
much.
we need money actually.
I really want it. Exactly.
So that's something.
Excellent. Okay, thank you all so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom and for making the effort to be here in the middle of an incredibly busy couple of weeks here at COP. We're really grateful for your time and a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much.